Welcome back, everyone. I hate to break it up. This chatter is energizing. It's so exciting to hear you all already naturally connecting, if I don't mean to be so punny. But we have a great second block in store for you. So buckle up. We're going to get started with a little bit of music to set the tone for the next block. There really is a lot of magic in music that goes beyond words. Humans throughout history have used it as a way to celebrate, remember, honor, and just let your hair down and get loose, right? We aren't the only organisms that respond to a good beat drop or a subtle melody. Our next speaker is a songwriter, nature lover, and his name is Tyler. You're going to get a chance to hear from him now, and then you'll also get a chance to hear more from him during our reception to follow. Tyler's current work focuses on the lives of Adirondack people from the last 200 years. His songwriting is rich in detail and brings listeners back in a time to the days before the Adirondacks were a vacation land. Let us put our hands together for Tyler DeZago.
Songs have been an essential form of oral tradition for centuries. They traverse generations, cultures, and continents. The catalog of traditional and folk music is massive and interconnected, and much of that music that we have here in the US and Canada found its way here from countries like Scotland, England, Ireland, Spain, and France. I grew up surrounded by traditional and folk music, Celtic, Southern Appalachian, English, Quebecois even. I started on the fiddle, an instrument that's really focused on melody. But as I began learning these songs and writing my own songs, my focus shifted towards lyrics. The language and the diction that songwriters choose for their lyrics is so important. Words can evoke emotion. They can tell a story. They can transport you to a different time or a different place. My favorite thing to do when hearing a traditional or folk song for the first time is to close my eyes and imagine where and when these took place. And if you'd like, I invite you to close your eyes and try it yourself. This is a traditional song from Scotland from the mid-1700s. Oh, summertime has come, and the trees are sweetly blooming, and the wild mountain thyme grows around the blooming heather. Will you go, lassie, will you go? And we'll all go together to pull wild mountain thyme all around the bloomin' heather. Will you go, lassie, will you go? Thank you. Now, these songs were all written by someone, but often it's forgotten who. Regardless, that song has traveled through generations upon generations. Here's another one I'll give you a chance to let your imagination work on. This time, this comes from the Ozark region of the US. It was first collected in the 1930s. Working on a new railroad, mud up to my knees. Working on a new railroad, mud up to my knees. Working for Big John Henry, ain't he so hard to please? I've been all around this world. I've been all around Cape Girardeau, parts of Arkansas. I've been all around Cape Girardeau, parts of Arkansas. I got so goddamn hungry I could hide behind a straw. Poor boy, I've been all around this world. Thank you. And as I dove deeper into these songs, I found that they truly do come from all over. So naturally, I started to wonder, are there any from right here in the Adirondacks? I mean, the expansive wilderness, the rich history of lumber camps, mining towns, sportsman lodges, and guides. The grandeur of this place just commands a legacy. And I did find some, actually. I was introduced to a few Adirondack folk songs, like Once More a Lumber and Go, or The Ballad of Blue Mountain Lake. I even met other songwriters, friends of mine now, who were playing these songs and writing their own. And I'm sure there's many more that I haven't heard yet. But I wanted to hear more. I'm a lover of history, and some of my favorite books are stories written by and about Adirondack people. And what I love about those is you can still visit a mountain or a river or a stream that someone's written about over the past 150 years or more, and likely nothing has changed. A few years ago, I was invited on a whitewater rafting trip on the Hudson River. It had been a wet summer, and the water was high. We started our first day with a float downstream from Newcomb, a leisurely paddle every once in a while to where we'd camp for the evening at the entrance to the Hudson River Gorge wilderness. That night, we sat around by campfire and headlamp and talked about what it would have been like to be there 150 years ago. As I said earlier, it's easy to imagine what this place might have looked like hundreds of years ago, but 150 years ago, it might have looked a lot like this. Throughout the 1800s and into the next century, the logging industry was huge in the Adirondacks. All winter long, men, typically French-Canadian or Irish, would work and live in shanty camps. They'd spend long, cold days hand-felling trees, stacking them high on sleds and skidding them down to the edge of a frozen lake or a river using a team of horses. That night, I fell asleep listening to the low hum of the rapids. The next day, we entered the Hudson River Gorge wilderness, a stretch of river with class 2 and 3 rapids. It was a lot of fun getting splashed, tossed around, bouncing off rocks. I couldn't help thinking of the river full of ice and logs and the men they called river drivers or jam crackers, experiencing these rapids in a different way. You see, when they'd shove these logs off into the river, they'd let the current carry them downstream. And the river drivers had a really important job. When the logs piled up, they'd go out on these logs and rocks with spikes on the bottom of their boots and 10-foot poles called pikes. And it was their job to shepherd those logs downstream. It was dangerous, cold work. On the Hudson, the logs would travel all the way down to Glens Falls, where they were corralled up in a big bend in the river and tallied. For river drivers, the days were long, the weather was cold. After a long day, they'd return to the shanty camp for a meal and to blow off steam. And in that melting pot of cultures and language, music was a way to connect. A simple song to pass the time, or a raging band to close out the night. After I got home from that trip, I knew there was a story to tell here. I felt inspired to write this historically fictitious song about two brothers that work the Hudson. It's called Headwaters, and if you'd like, I invite you once more to close your eyes and imagine where this takes you. from the headwaters of the Hudson, below the Indian, round the bend at Blue Ledges, the logs are rolling in. I was born on the banks of a river of sand and stone. My kinsmen worked for a better life, from the woods to the shore. Those unforgiving waters, I've seen many a man, his life and loved ones left behind, taken at the river's hand. Roll on, my brothers, roll on. Ride the waters to the East Branch, roll on. And when I collect my pay, send the most to my baby, drink the rest to that river, the dead and gone. Was my first winter as an axeman, my brother drove the team, stacking white pine, spruce, and balsam on the ice of Lake 13. On that first warm week in April, we left that crooked road, hung the axe and kissed our families, down the river we'd go. Roll on, my brothers, roll on. Ride the waters to the East Branch, roll on. And when I collect my pay, send the most to my baby, drink the rest to that river, the dead and gone. Was my first winter as an axeman, that butler's moving fast, churns the depths of deepest pools, spitting logs from seasons past. And with brads on our boot soles and a tall pike in the hand, I run the frozen logs to the head of the jam. I called out for my brother, I'm too weak to pry it loose against the will of the water. Then that river lunged at us, and I fell back on the river's bank, and he still had his hold. Then the jam gave out, swept him down, he was 25 years old. Roll on, my brother, roll on. Ride the waters to the East Branch, roll on. And when I collect my pay, send the most to my baby, drink the rest to that river, the dead and gone. Well, his wife he made a widow, but never found his bones. I believe he never left here, for I ever feel his soul. Now the foreman, I still work the woods, and I sing his shanty song, before the mighty Hudson swept away my brother dead and gone. Roll on, my brother, roll on. Ride the waters into heaven, roll on. And when I collect my pay, send the most to my baby, drink the rest to that river, the dead and gone. Drink the rest to that river, the dead and gone. We drink the rest to my brother, dead and gone. Thank you.
Our planet's diverse, thriving ecosystems may seem like permanent fixtures, but they're actually vulnerable to collapse. Jungles can become deserts, and reefs can become lifeless rocks, even without cataclysmic events like volcanoes and asteroids. What makes one ecosystem strong and another weak in the face of change? The answer, to a large extent, is biodiversity. Biodiversity is built out of three intertwined features: ecosystem diversity, species diversity, and genetic diversity. The more intertwining there is between these features, the denser and more resilient the weave becomes. Take the Amazon rainforest, one of the most biodiverse regions on Earth due to its complex ecosystems, huge mix of species, and the genetic variety within those species. Here are tangled liana vines, which crawl up from the forest floor to the canopy, intertwining with treetops and growing thick wooded stems that support these towering trees. Helped along by the vines, trees provide the seeds, fruits, and leaves to herbivores such as the tapir and the agouti, which disperse their seeds throughout the forest so they can grow. Leftovers are consumed by the millions of insects that decompose and recycle nutrients to create rich soil. The rainforest is a huge system filled with many smaller systems like this, each packed with interconnected species. Every link provides stability to the next, strengthening biodiversity's weave. That weave is further reinforced by the genetic diversity within individual species, which allows them to cope with changes. Species that lack genetic diversity due to isolation or low population numbers are much more vulnerable to fluctuations caused by climate change, disease, or habitat fragmentation. Whenever a species disappears because of its weakened gene pool, a knot is untied and parts of the net disintegrate. So, what if we were to remove one species from the rainforest? Would the system fall apart? Probably not. The volume of species, their genetic diversity, and the complexity of the ecosystems form such rich biodiversity in this forest that one species gap in the weave won't cause it to unravel. The forest can stay resilient and recover from change. But that's not true in every case. In some environments, taking away just one important component can undermine the entire system. Take coral reefs, for instance. Many organisms in a reef are dependent on the coral. It provides key microhabitats, shelter, and breeding grounds for thousands of species of fish, crustaceans, and mollusks. Corals also form interdependent relationships with fungi and bacteria. The coral itself is a loom that allows the tangled net of biodiversity to be woven. That makes coral a keystone organism, one that many others depend on for their survival. So what happens when destructive fishing practices, pollution, and ocean acidification weaken coral or even kill it altogether? Exactly what you might think. The loss of this keystone species leaves its dependents at a loss too, threatening the entire fabric of the reef. Ecosystem, species, and genetic diversity together form the complex tangled weave of biodiversity that is vital for the survival of organisms on Earth. We humans are woven into this biodiversity too. When just a few strands are lost, our own well-being is threatened. Cut too many links, and we risk unraveling it all. What the future brings is unpredictable, but biodiversity can give us an insurance policy, Earth's own safety net, to safeguard our survival.
That video interlude holds a special place in our hearts. It was actually written by Tupper Lake's very own Kim Preshoff and animated by TED. So, very much. Next, we're honored to welcome to the stage Keely Jock. Keely grew up in Akwesasne as an enrolled member of the St. Regis Mohawk tribe and Mohawk Council of Akwesasne. As a recent graduate of Paul Smith College with a Bachelor in Science degree in Environmental Science, Keely is starting off her future working as a Climate Justice Fellow at the Adirondack North Country Association. Out of the office, you may find them skiing, reading, drinking coffee, or picking up any other number of random hobbies. But this evening, their talk examines the decisions that we make today and how those shape the world for those of us to come. It's a lesson not only in sustainability, but also a reminder that our shared responsibility is to honor the earth and its resources. Please help me welcome Keely Jock.
Sego, wat kunu alado, Kili Yungyats, Wakatahuni, Ganagahaga, Niogo Uzodo. Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Keely. I'm Wolf Clan, and I'm of the Mohawk Nation and part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. The Haudenosaunee, which translates to the people of the Longhouse, also known as the Iroquois or the Six Nations, is one of the world's longest-standing participatory democracies. Made up of the Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, and Mohawk, and Tuscarora nations. Haudenosaunee youth are taught that we have a responsibility to the next 7 generations after us, because one day we will have to return the world to those we are borrowing it from, the ones who have not yet been born. This has been referred to as the 7th generation principle. This lesson keeps you humble and mindful, and you're reminded that you are not separate from nature, nor the most important thing to exist, but you still hold the power to be a revolutionist. The 7th generation principle is instrumental for all youth since they have the power to shape the future. They need to be given the chance to make this world better for their descendants. Indigenous knowledge, also known as IK, are powerful ways of knowing based on good relations with the planet that are dynamic and adaptive to the environments in which we live. Indigenous knowledge has both big picture lessons and hyper-focused information on how to live sustainably. With this knowledge, we recognize the negative effects of colonization, particularly its legacy of exploiting the land and water. Western-centric thinking often views the world as a resource to be maximized for profit. And one of colonialism's fundamental targets is the control of land and water. So certain ecosystems are more prone to degradation. Wetlands are a prime example, as these ecosystems are often viewed as a nuisance for Western development because you can't build or farm on a wetland. So wetlands are often drained, filled, and dredged to create usable land. Even so, Western science, which is a body of knowledge that relies on the scientific method to understand and explain our world, views wetlands as critical ecosystems. Wetlands provide services to the environment and humans, such as purifying water, flood mitigation, habitat for endemic species of plants and animals, and storing mass amounts of carbon. They can even be used to help mitigate the effects of climate change. These ecosystems store floodwaters generated by intense storms that will become more frequent as our climate continues to change. Wetlands are also one of the world's largest carbon sinks due to a lack of decomposition, which keeps carbon out of the atmosphere and stabilizes the climate. While this body of knowledge provides a valuable scientific way to look at wetlands, it often devalues and ignores indigenous knowledge, even though native peoples have been living and stewarding the lands for tens of thousands of years. Indigenous knowledge can and should be used in answering today's questions, as indigenous peoples have been stewards of the land since time immemorial. Incorporating indigenous knowledge can inform better management of wetlands and other environmental projects to help allocate limited resources. This is supported through my own work. For my undergraduate research project, we used indigenous knowledge to inform standardized EPA wetland quality assessments. The EPA has standard assessments that determine the quality of a wetland and what to do with it. But a problem that often occurs is highly impacted wetlands get shoved to the back of the line, even if those types of habitats might be highly valuable for indigenous communities. In Akwesasne, my hometown and a Mohawk reservation about an hour and a half north, on the border of so-called Canada and the United States, is around 12,000 acres, and much of the territory is wetlands. Anytime there is construction, the site will be drained and filled. Many wetlands located on the territory of Akwesasne have been highly impacted due to development or agriculture. Our chosen site was located off of a road that cuts directly through a wetland. The road is a massive barrier to the wetland's hydrology because of an inadequate number of suitably sized culverts to allow for proper water flow. That and the beavers like to clog up every culvert and outsmart the beaver deceivers. To collect data on the territory, we needed permission from the St. Regis Mohawk tribe. We scheduled a Zoom meeting with the Environment Division and were given permission as long as we went out with tribal employees. Our data collection was to be used as a learning experience for tribal employees because we would be performing what is called an intensive vegetation assessment, where you have to identify plant species in the field from the tallest plants to the shortest plants. After we compiled our list of species from our field day in Akwesasne and from 14 other sites throughout the Adirondacks that could be deemed pristine. 36 species were identified at Akwesasne, and 179 species across the other 14 sites. For each species on our list, we found its biodiversity coefficient, which is a number that botanists have assigned to plants to indicate their affinity for particular habitats, on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 meaning a plant will grow anywhere, and 10, a plant will only grow in very specific places. We then found the average of its biodiversity coefficients for each of the 15 sites, with the Akwesasne site having a low average for biodiversity, and compared to the other sites, it placed third to last. To incorporate indigenous knowledge, we looked at the ethnobotanical properties of plants. This is the study of how humans interact with plants. For the purpose of our study, we focused on how indigenous people locally use plants. In many current vegetation assessments, there is a small list of plant species that are labeled as culturally important to Native peoples, but that is usually as far as it goes. So, we created a new index of specific ethnobotanical properties by seeing it through the lens of medicinal, ceremonial, material, and food use. Each plant was then given a 1 or 0 for each category. To do this, my mentor and I sat in a coffee shop for 3 hours, flipping through a huge book called Native American Ethnobotany by Daniel Moorman. And he told me the properties that each species had for all 179 plants. With this information, we determined the percent for each ethnobotanical category across all 15 sites. This is where it gets cool. When looking at our new index, the Akwesasne wetland had the second highest percentage of ceremonially used plants. So it went from being one of the lowest priority sites based on just biodiversity to one of the highest for ceremonial uses. The other ethnobotanical categories for Akwesasne ranked either higher or the same as its biodiversity average. Including IK and environmental projects can improve the allocation of limited resources by reinforcing biodiversity values and creating equity for highly impacted systems. The study site in Akwesasne moved up in priority when indigenous knowledge informed the standard assessment while still showing that the biodiversity metric is a valuable index but can be improved. Wetlands are complex ecosystems with high variability. By including indigenous knowledge into these assessment practices, we ensure a more complete understanding of a wetland's place in the ecosystem and among people. Indigenous knowledge amplifies the idea that we are part of Earth and nothing is above anything else. Everything is sacred for the sake of its existence, not because it is useful or valuable. Indigenous people know that water is life and should be protected at all costs. We as humans need to stop putting the monetary value of resources above the well-being of all of our relatives who have existed alongside us, before us, and after us. The 7th generation principle should be brought into policymaking with the hopes that decision makers will be more mindful of their roles in the long-lasting effects that their decisions will have on the world and peoples to come. As we are part of 7 generations past who thought about our future now, we need to make choices, laws, and policies with consideration of those who will come after us. Using knowledge cultivated over thousands of years can save this planet, but it needs to be done properly through partnerships. This would exhibit strong support for Native management and co-management practices and potential contributions towards land-back initiatives for Native peoples by returning land and stewardship rights. Meaningful partnerships and the land-back movement support the self-determination of Indigenous communities. Friendships and cooperation need to be established between Western scientists and Indigenous communities because respecting Indigenous people is what would make or break a strong relationship. These partnerships need to make space for knowledge keepers, but not speak for them. This also needs to be done with intention and openness and ensure that Indigenous people will not be tokenized or culture appropriated. With this, there needs to be respect for knowledge keepers as legal shareholders of intellectual property. And they need to be given the freedom to share knowledge, but also withhold information that is not appropriate for non-Native folks to know. Indigenous people and being in spaces of decision-making and management opens doors for powerful change in our world to address our problems of today, like climate change and wetland degradation. Discomfort is the first step to improving multiculturalism in Western science, and scientists need to be open to an influx of multiculturalism in a space that has never had to hold space for people before. There's a lot of work to be done, and the fun is just starting, so how can you be a part of that change? Yawa, ji, wasado hunsadode. Thank you for listening.
Keep it going for Keely. Come on. Yeah, right? So the metric that we use to evaluate the world around us, that lens, that perspective, it matters, right? I am so appreciative of how tonight that we have been invited to reflect on our own perspectives and consider how might we invite new ways of thinking and collaboration into our lives and our work. Our next speaker is a creative concoction of whimsy and wonder. Someone who focused their energy to create spaces that broaden people's perspective by introducing them to new experiences, people, and art forms. Echo has managed just that as the co-founder of the station in Onchiota, New York. The station is a funky experimental art space that is working to amplify and support creative culture. Tonight, we're going to see how essential an ingredient curiosity is in our individual and community growth. So let us introduce and welcome Echo.
Before I start, can we just give one more round of applause to the whole awesome crew at the Wild Center who spent months organizing this? So give it up for the Wild Center again, please. Okay. And this stuff, all these banners, I can tell you they weren't here yesterday. They were up here late last night or early this morning. And this place is awesome. We have not just this banners, but this. The TEDxTupper Lake logo. I kind of feel like I'm in the internet right now. But it's just so amazing. But also this right here, the iconic red circle rug. It's about 4 feet around. It's got this really lovely texture to it. I feel really comfortable up here. It's pretty safe. And if you've ever watched a TED Talk video, you'll see this circle. And I watched a lot of them before today, just to figure out what the vibe was of a TED Talk. And kind of what I noticed was that most people stayed inside the circle the whole time. So I kind of wondered, is there a rule about that? Do I have to stay in the circle the whole time? And Google searching, internet stuff. And I ended up on the TED website, eventually, the actual source of information. And I didn't find a rule. It's more just kind of like a best practice cultural expectation thing that I will stay inside the circle during my talk. But that kind of causes a problem. My entire talk is to tell you that you're supposed to step outside your comfort zone. So I don't really think I'm supposed to stay inside the circle and then tell you to step outside the circle. That would just be it wouldn't make any sense at all. So here we go. And now the great thing is, too, that was a very small perspective, and there was no way I can understand what this side of the stage felt like. It's totally different over here. It's unknown, it's dark, it's a hidden spot. And I also could not guess what these people were experiencing, or you right here. I mean, I had no idea what it felt like to be in this spot and look over there. So I have now kind of done a little exploration. I've gained some new perspectives and knowledge, and I am going to wander back up to this circle because that helps the tech crew, and also because it is comfortable, and I like it here. It's my comfort zone. but we can't always stay inside our comfort zone. I mean, I believe that best practices should always be questioned. How do we know if they're best practices unless we're interrogating them? I believe that the curious shall be rewarded, and that you have to take a risk sometimes to go out and figure out what's going on. And I also believe that curiosity is the key that can unlock our ability to step outside our ideological comfort zones, not just things that were experience-based, but how we actually think, what beliefs we have. And it's curiosity that pulls you out of where you are. Because if I just stay inside here, I'm not connecting with any of you out there. I'm not connecting to other experiences that are out there. Now, our comfort zones are not an actual physical thing, but if they were, they would look pretty much just like a tree. And you are a tree, if you think about it. So when a tree is growing, it starts off as this delicate, tiny little sapling, and it's just a little thin thing. That's that ring right there in the middle. But then every season the tree grows, it expands, it adds a layer, it becomes stronger. And what the great thing about the rings on these trees is that it doesn't just tell us how old the tree is. It actually tells us kind of the history of experiences the tree had. When you see the larger growth rings up here, that means that was a more plentiful year for resources for that tree, and it grew a lot. And then if you see the tighter rings, it had to struggle a bit, and it didn't grow quite as much. And it's the same thing for us. So as a person, here's my comfort zone, and I step outside of it. I have a new experience. I meet a new person. I add a growth ring to myself, and that's what you're all doing too. And some of the experiences are more profound and larger than others. And that is how we grow. We don't grow by staying safe inside what we think now. We have to keep going out and exploring. Also, we have not just us, but an entire cultural society thing happening in the world. You might have heard about it. And let's pretend that now this circle is the norms and the cultural expectations of our current culture. And in this current culture of past state America, women do not have the right to vote. And so I'm in here as a part of society. There's a lot of us, and we're hanging out in this safe zone of our ideas because it's working for us. But I'm starting to kind of look outside over to where those people were, and maybe I see that there's different ideas. So I'm moving a little bit closer, I'm thinking about it. But I started to encounter this edge here. And right along this edge is where that cognitive dissonance kicks in really hardcore. And you have two ideas, and you are not sure. Because right in here in the circle, this is your family, your friends, your community. And they're telling you, no, you gotta stay in the circle. Because those people out there, they're crazy and they're radicals, and they're gonna undo everything we've worked so hard to make. Boy, you just get a little closer. And then you kind of, eventually, you have to leave where you are comfortable. And I'm gonna go over to this group of people, and we have some talks, maybe some debates. They're giving me information about why women should be voting, and I'm listening to them, and we're having some potluck dinners and the things you do when you're meeting people. And so I've got these ideas now. I'm like, oh, that's actually kind of something I believe in. So I can go back to the circle now of culture, and I step back in. I'm like, yo, guys, everyone, check this out. There's actually a lot of good ideas I have about women having the right to vote. And the people in here are like, no, that's not a good idea at all. We should definitely not do that. And then it's like, we all just start to churn and talk and debate. And after years and years of struggle and sacrifice, we now have that right to vote for people. And so, yes. But remember, that was normal. That was what is acceptable. It was unacceptable to leave that circle and think of that as an idea. And the same thing happened with laws enforcing racial segregation. There's so many things you can think about where we're staying safe in our ideas and culture, and we're calling the people out there crazy and radical, and they're going to destroy everything. But now we've actually grown. So if I just go backwards here in time, I think that's an option. Maybe it is. Yes, thank you. So if this is our culture now, it's not just one person, it's a bunch of us, and we've grown and grown and grown. And just like a tree, We can become stronger as a society by leaving the comfort zone and, getting out there and doing things. So now we're just going to take a little break and kind of meander to the left or the right over here. Which side? I don't know. There's too many sides. There's only one or two. But that's another thing too. Like right now we have left and right, and I'm being pulled back and forth between the two. But why isn't there an idea over there in that corner? Or an idea there in that corner? Like why isn't there some group that I can gravitate towards that meets more who I am as a person or you are as a person? Well, those are questions you can ask with your curiosity. And that's what we're talking about today is curiosity. It's not like, I'm curious what avocado ice cream tastes like, so I'm going to try avocado ice cream. That's awesome. But it's really about being curious to question the current systems and norms that we just take for granted, like they're oxygen. We don't question them. But think of the things that everyone questioned in the past so we can have this now, for real. So sometimes you've got people a little bit locked in their comfort zone, and that's all right because comfort zones exist for a reason. Things have happened in your life. You've had experiences. You got to feel secure and safe, but you got to leave it sometimes too. So here's a little story about a place my partner and I built. It's out in the woods, the Adirondacks. It's in a tiny little hamlet called Onchiota, and there's not much else around Onchiota. It is a place people come to go hiking and biking and paddling. It's a really beautiful place. And this building that we got used to be a grocery store, and it was a post office, and a few other things. It was basically the cultural meeting place back when this area was banging with like sawmills, and there was all kinds of sanatoriums happening, and people were there. It was an IGA grocery store. It's where people came to get their supplies, but more importantly, they came to hang out. And they shared ideas, and they met people, and they found out what was going on. So we have the station here, and actually, appropriately, what we do at the station is if you've been to a grocery store, and there's someone offering you a free sample of food you haven't tried, we're just doing that, but with experiences instead of food. So every summer, we have these events that are called summer sessions, and we bring in musicians and artists, and they're like a big weekend-long party, that we have open for everyone. It's free. And so if you're driving down this empty road, it's just trees and trees and trees, you might come across this. This is an invitation. The sign on the front of the station says, "The curious shall be rewarded." When people ask us what that means, it's like a different answer every time. But basically, I'll just point and say, well, you get to see this art, or you get to see this band, or whatever it might be. That's your reward. You are growing somehow. So summer sessions are kind of an invitation for people to come meet people they maybe know, but more importantly, they don't know. There's a large public campsite down the road. People come from Canada and all over. They're camping, and it's just this chance to mix up all kinds of ideological people with all kinds of outdoor people, and we make it a fun time. And it looks kind of like your typical farmer's market or an arts and crafts festival. But what we've actually tried to do is take all the events you typically see at a farmer's market or arts and crafts festival, and we would just reimagine them and make them a little more creative or different. Or when we have music, for instance, on our stage, and circus performers, things like that, there's always something a little bit behind the scenes going on. For instance, this is Degat Slios, an amazing First Nations hip-hop artist who we brought in. And usually if you're at a farmer's market, there's some kind of quiet background music. That's not the way we do it. We make the music right there. And we make the music say something, too. We give people a platform. So this person, they're up there, not just performing entertainment, but some of their songs are bringing up concepts about the land back concept, an idea of those things that maybe someone who came for a bunch of kale did not expect to get. This one's great. Okay. So also, we had a thrash metal band play one time. And the cool thing about that is, so you weren't expecting that at a farmer's market for sure, I guess. And you might look at this and there's spikes and there's like the skulls hanging off a drum set and metal. But metal is its own subculture that a lot of people don't engage with. And so We are bringing different parts of culture that you might not go seek out, and we're just giving them to you for free. There's no pressure. You can come and go. Maybe you just want to get the kale and you're out. Or you get the kale and you hang out for a couple songs. But the funny and awesome thing about this band, too, why they were chosen, besides that they're so rad, they're called Executive Disorder, and they're from Peru, New York. You should check them out. But Executive Disorder has 2 teachers in it. Those 2 guys in the front are both teachers at local school. So all their songs are kind of like miniature history lessons. And then the other person up there, the younger person with a hat on, is the son of one of the other ones. So it's like a family band singing songs about history to thrash metal. So it's not what you expect, but you're hopefully going to learn something if you can get past the volume and ferocity of it, you know. This one, okay, we've brought this group a few times. They're called Bada and Ya, an amazing West African drum-based group, and they are just doing the songs from West Africa. Every one of these people moved here from there, and when they get together, it's just, you feel like you've gone to West Africa. So once again, you came to get like maybe some carrots, but you got this. And then other days, we had this one. This was actually a great collaboration. This dragon was made by students at North Country School, and it was part of the production of The Hobbit. And it actually never left the school. And so I talked to the teacher. I was like, what's going to happen to this? He's like, well, we're just going to take it apart. And it goes kind of to the scrap heap. And so we decided to bring it to the station for this day and hang it up. And it wasn't planned this way, but on this same day, we had a First Nations author who was reading stories that were based in their culture that were kind of like horror stories also. Like the idea, like we tell these stories to teach the children to behave. But she modernized them and made them more like teen horror based. And so then behind that is acoustic singer-songwriter. We always give people what they understand first. It's like, here's an appetizer, and then surprise. You know, another thing comes up. So he's playing acoustic guitar, but behind that person, I'll just explain it to you. There's this giant wall of amps. There's this cage with chicken wire, and there's like chains hanging down from it, and like things from tractors and cymbals. And this person would come up, and they have boots on, and they're like playing this. They're called the Turf and Turf, the nuclear blues explosion. And they're just singing these songs, right? And they stomp their boots on the ground. That's the percussion. They're playing guitar, they're singing, and then they have this glove on, and they're punching the cymbals and rattling the chains to fill out the percussion section. They can only play for like a 40-minute set, and they're just wiped out and exhausted. But anyway, once again, it's a cultural experience. It's like a fringe thing that we go out and find these things and bring them back and give them to you for free. You can just try it like a free sample in the grocery store. But also, this is a really fun thing we do, and this is called the Invisible Creatures Petting Zoo. So the Invisible Creatures Petting Zoo is our play on what a petting zoo would be. If you go to your regular farmer's market, there's a couple of sheep or some goats, and you get to pet them. But we thought, what if there was a place where you gave people license and permission to create anything they wanted? So the Invisible Creatures Petting Zoo at the beginning of the day is empty, but by the end of the day, it's full of fantastical creatures. This picture was actually the very first day we did this, and it's evolved quite a bit since then. There's more like little cubbies for animals to live inside of. There's magical food they can eat. But even on this day, with it's very simple, like here's a fence, and there's this ritual, and there's this bell you ring, and it's all explained on this paper. But even with this simple version of it, here's some of the things that people created just from their imaginations. This first one, Ginny made us Zooby Dooby the Gartox, and it's from Planet Potato. And here are 3 interesting things about this creature. She likes eating music. Her favorite color is ultraviolet, and she never poops. Efficient. Okay, Jacob has made us a tiger squirrel from India. The tiger squirrel can change colors. He can jump from trees to clouds, and he only collects the happiest nuts. And I want to stress that this is not just kids, it's kids and adults doing this. We've had people who have drawn their desired life partner and written the qualities they're looking for, and then they go and they staple it to the wall, and they're like, it's like their way of summoning the person they're looking for, I suppose. And this next one actually is kind of one of my favorite ones. I almost cry sometimes when I see it. This is the listening horse. The listening horse comes from the clouds on a lonely day. The listening horse will listen, love, and let you know you're not alone. Yeah, I know. So that's just, when you give someone license and permission with no boundaries, this is what happens. If you said draw an animal and put it in the petting zoo, you'd probably get pictures of sheep and goats and cats and dogs, and maybe one listening horse occasionally. So the station is a place to sort of trigger your curiosity. And these simple little fun things are connected to the ideal. You want someone who's just like firmly planted in the middle of their circle to just maybe start nudging themselves like, well, I really thought that thrash metal was like just for like people who are like satanic and horrible, but those guys are teachers and they're actually friendly. And so they're just like on the edge and they're getting that cognitive dissonance thing, right? And that's great, because when you feel that confusion, that's when you have a chance to grow. When we feel confused, our brains actually kick in the survival instinct to go away from the new thing. It might eat us. But if you can sort of get yourself to push past that, you actually grow just like the tree would be doing. So this last one is probably really hard to see, but this is definitely my favorite thing so far that anyone has ever drawn in the Invisible Creatures Petting Zoo. So one day I was doing something like running sound for a band or something busy, and this small adult child person came up to me, very concerned, to let me know there's a hole in the fence and the creatures were escaping. And I was like, okay, I'll be over there and deal with that in a minute. And so by the time I got over there, I hadn't come fast enough, and so they had drawn a piece of fence. So if you can't see it, this is a drawing, and there's a fence, and then the kids stapled it to the wall with like a lot of staples, just to make sure we closed that gap in the fence and the creatures could not escape. And this is what it's all about. So this person saw a problem, they were curious how they could solve it, they used their imagination, and they did it, okay? They just did it. So that's what we all need to do, okay? Curiosity is not just for growing our individual selves, but it's so that we can become stronger as a collective. And a lot of problems are a lot harder to fix than drawing a piece of fence. But we have to start being brave enough to withstand social pressure or social norms and just do what we feel is right. And sometimes that means leaving your comfort zone to find out what's going on in the rest of the world. Because you are a tree, but you're not just a single tree all alone out there. You're actually a tree whose roots are interconnected with the roots of 8 billion other trees on this planet. And it is a scientific fact that trees communicate, and we communicate. We have to use curiosity to make the world a more kind, empathetic, and just place, not just make ourselves more interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Echo. Ironically, I now feel like a square standing in the middle of this circle. Moving on. Logan Smalley is the founding director of TED's global education initiative called TED-Ed. It's an award-winning website that serves millions of teachers and students throughout the world every single day through educational animations and their student talks program. We're actually fortunate enough to have had Logan take a minute out of his very busy day while attending a TED event in Atlanta to record this video for us. Take it away, Logan.
Greetings, TEDxTupper Lake. This is Logan Smalley, the founder of TED-Ed. I hope you can hear me. I'm actually backstage at the TED Next conference in Atlanta. I don't know if you can see this, but or hear this, but I am so impressed with the event that you all are putting together, and so grateful. Everyone at the org is so grateful that you're doing that. I'm really excited about how connected to nature all the talks feel. It's a topic that, despite my current surroundings, my team and I are very passionate about climate, about science and natural sciences, and also about people getting together in settings like that and settings like this to share their ideas on how to protect and celebrate such important things. So you'll see that reflected in the TED-Ed animations that we produce and in the ideas that bubble up from students and educators in the programs that we run. And I'm really excited that you'll be adding to that conversation both on stage and off stage at your event. And I wish you the best. And hi, Kim. Hi, Jen. Thank you so much. Enjoy the day.
That made me feel really special. Thanks, Logan. I just want to pause just for a moment just to thank you all for being here again today. It's so wonderful that we have all this energy and wonderful minds in this room to share together. We've been able to immerse ourselves in these really inspiring discussions. We've laughed. Some of us have cried. And for myself, I know that I am just like ready to get out and tackle the world with all these great new ideas. But before we can jump into all these next amazing speakers, we need to refresh our palates for a moment. We're going to do a little cleanse of our palates before we move forward. And when I say we are going to take a cleanse of our palates, I mean it literally. So our staff right now are going to be walking around with some lemon sorbet. For any of you that would like to cleanse your palates before we continue to our next speakers. I know, aren't they great? So they will be passing you down a plate with individual lemon sorbet cups, and there are spoons on them. They'll pass them down the line for anyone that would like them. We'll give them a moment to pass you some of those. I'm really sorry for all of you online who don't get to be here and enjoy this with us. My dad tried to invent smell-o-vision and taste-o-vision in the 90s. Hasn't happened yet. Sorry. So take this sorbet break to go palate cleanse yourself and then hop on back here in just a couple of moments. So for those of you that are allowing the sorbet to swirl around your palate and cleanse it for our next steps, it really serves as that cleanser in between meals, but it can help to cleanse our minds, the coldness, the refreshingness, so that we can enjoy our next talks. Picture each bite that you take of this sorbet helping you to ground the thoughts that you've had, center those ideas, and then hold them in the past, making space, the fresh palate, for our next speakers. As we do so, you can let your mind meander down the Racket River on this beautiful, foggy fall morning, a space that if you'd love to, you can canoe and traverse yourself. And let your thoughts swirl. And let us get ready to dive into the more engaging conversations ahead. You're welcome to hold on to those little cups and enjoy your little bites of sorbet as we continue. And if anyone is done, please feel welcome to pass them to our staff who are coming around. Alrighty, well, thank you all for taking a moment to reset, recenter, so that we can move ourselves forward to the next part of our show. How do we feel after that? Is anyone willing to share? Okay, I'm feeling some energizing, some like calm, cool refreshness coming from the center over here. All right, well, thank you all. I'm going to invite my favorite co-host up To be fair, he's also my least favorite co-host. I'm kidding. Nick Gunn, if you want to come on up and introduce what we have coming on next. Thank you, everyone.
How about that for a literal palate cleanser? Cami Sheridan is many things. She's a lifelong Adirondacker. She's a professor and disability specialist at North Country Community College. She's a board member of local organizations and nonprofits. She's a mom. Now, at the beginning of the event, I told you all that we would pull back the curtain a little bit, and I feel like we're building a pretty good rapport, so I can tell you, I wrote this intro earlier this week. I rehearsed it yesterday, and in the middle of it, almost totally broke down. And I promised her that I would not do it again today. But it's hard. Her discussion about community and what it's like to feel a supportive community and what that means to a family in crisis, it resonates with me, and it makes me think of my own personal connection. You know, as a dad of a newborn who entered this world under precarious conditions, I know what it feels like to be a parent and to feel like things are totally out of your control. Now, luckily, everything is good, everybody is happy, everybody is healthy, but what the experience reaffirmed to me is that there's a special place in heaven or the afterlife or whatever you want to call it, if you believe in that sort of thing, for people like doctors and people like nurses and family and friends and neighbors and coworkers who step up and provide support when you're faced with something terrifying like that. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Cami Sheridan.
How many times have you found yourself wincing and cringing when you watch someone take a bad fall? Or tear up because you see someone else visibly upset at a funeral? As a professor of psychology, I discuss with my class the idea of mirror neurons and other regions of the brain, and the role they play in empathy, and how it leads to the connections that we make with others as social beings. This includes when someone is experiencing pain or sadness. Pain that others around us experience resonates in us literally as humans. As a parent, we are programmed to respond to an infant's cry. Crying is a mechanism that tells the parent something is wrong, something is painful, do something, make it stop. There is nothing we won't do to take away our child's pain. But what happens when we can't make the pain stop? Our children look to us to keep them safe and their world predictable, to ensure there are no monsters under the bed. But when the unexpected shows up, it can bring vulnerability and chaos, disrupting the most predictable of worlds. This is my daughter, Sarah, at the age of 8 in the Panama jungle, visiting the Imbara tribe with her father, Mike. Their days were spent swimming and paddling on the Chagres River, learning the crafts and culture of the Imbara, and being active participants in their world for a short while. So here is Sarah traveling and having an incredible life experience, with no indication that her life would change drastically. It was a few weeks after returning from Panama that Sarah was diagnosed with the somewhat rare disease, erythromelalgia, also known as Burning Man syndrome. Sarah experienced severe burning in both her hands and feet, and it was followed a few weeks later with the loss of some motor function due to a large nerve fiber neuropathy. Sarah was first in Burlington, Vermont, and then Boston Children's Hospital for many weeks, and it's where Sarah's care continues today. So there was no easy solution to controlling the pain, and our moments of sheer fear and panic became an almost daily experience. We took turns keeping ice packs filled for Sarah, as it was the only thing that seemed to keep the burning at bay. And this was truly a time of chaos and total vulnerability for all of us. But through this chaos and vulnerability came new connections, as well as previous connections being strengthened. And it's these connections that were demonstrated to us in so many ways throughout our experience. So although Sarah had been receiving incredible care since arriving at Boston Children's Hospital, we hadn't seen any change in her condition. One night, when Sarah had been in Boston Children's for roughly 4 weeks, I heard from the Erythromelalgia Association about a pediatric pain specialist at Stanford University by the name of Dr. Elliot Crane. I found a linen closet where no one would hear me call Dr. Crane's office, and I left a very erratic message explaining Sarah's situation and that Sarah was being treated at Boston Children's. Little did I know, I was leaving a message with the former residency colleague of the physician in charge of Sarah's care at Children's. Early the following morning, Dr. Charles Birdie, a Time magazine hero in medicine recipient, among other distinguished awards, was waiting for me outside of Sarah's room. Dr. Birdie was in his biking gear, his helmet resting on his hip. He smiled at me and shared that he received a call from a colleague of many years and that Dr. Crane was aware of Sarah's situation before my call. I felt very sheepish for a minute, but then I reminded myself, it's okay. I am doing my job as her mother. It also became apparent that things were not working in a vacuum. People were concerned, people cared, and were connecting with others to help. When looking at Sarah's case, we could have assumed that the only focus was treating the erythromelalgia, but that would be wrong. Here is an 8-year-old child who had been taken from all she knew of how the world worked and thrown into a centrifuge of doctors, nurses, tests, and medications. And this had to happen. But what also had to happen was for Sarah to connect with others on both the inside and outside of her situation to help make sense of it all. And that said, Mike and I had to do the same. While in Boston, we were given the place to stay as a gift by this wonderful family, and it was given to us for an extended period of time while Sarah was receiving treatment. And this connection came from Sarah's Uncle Kevin. Uncle Kevin knew this wonderful family who had a summer home in the Adirondacks. And this led us to Jessica. Jessica became one of those people who Sarah put faith in and trusted that there were rainbows to be found even in a downpour. Jessica made sure Sarah had fun crafts and activities during long periods of time in Boston and filled Sarah's time with crazy and fun stories. And as Sarah continued to grow, so had this relationship, a connection that developed through empathy and the desire to help. Another connection was in Sarah's hometown of Lake Placid in the Adirondack Mountains. Sarah's second-grade teacher, Natalie Colby, made the 6-hour drive to see Sarah and to bring a quilt made by her classmates, a quilt that hangs in her room still today. Family and friends also made the long drive to see Sarah, even though they weren't able to stay long due to the extensive pain she was experiencing. These visits gave Sarah strength, however, knowing that people that she cared so much about also cared deeply for her and were still with her. As the years continued, a host of new medications and treatment plans brought us to Boston roughly every 5 weeks for 5 years. And many times the trips to Boston were provided to us by Patient Airlift Services Skyhope, offering flights to and from Boston at no cost to us. And this connection came through our dear friend Maureen. And once back in Boston, staying at the home of the same kind and incredibly generous family who were there for us during our initial crisis. The connections and supports kept growing, but Sarah's condition eventually morphed into what is referred to as chronic regional pain syndrome, or CRPS. Sarah began experiencing symptoms such as significant headaches, chronic fatigue, and other issues, along with the ever-present erythromelalgia. When Sarah was 14, she was spending less and less time attending school and sleeping on average 16 to 20 hours a day, having little engagement with anyone. Every morning, we woke hopeful that Sarah would feel good today, good enough to go to school, good enough to want to be with her friends, good enough to go outside, just good enough to want to do anything. But it wasn't happening. Sarah was losing connection with all that she had worked so hard to rebuild. On one of the darkest days in January of 2018, we received a call that there was an opening at the Mayo Family Pediatric Pain Rehabilitation Center at Boston Children's Hospital. And it was here at the PPRC that the daily patterns of existence bringing little relief were going to be broken, and that Sarah would face one of the hardest challenges of her life. Sarah worked to train her brain to interpret the pain signals into something different, less malicious. Sarah was now working on making new connections within her own body. So while we worked on strengthening the connections that had weakened in Sarah's outside world, Sarah was working on the weakened connections within her own world and in her own body through daily rituals to maintain all that she had gained during her 7 weeks at the PPRC. I will state again, this was incredibly hard work. Forcing herself to go to school every day, walking and participating in activities regardless of the pain she was experiencing. Going places with her friends when really all she wanted to do was go home and sleep away the pain. And it was this strategy that allowed Sarah to take back control of her life and to recognize that her pain, albeit sometimes very real and present, did not need to be the constant monster under the bed. Sarah was taught the tools necessary to overcome her fear and through mitigated and mindful steps, get back into life, a life of her choosing. So, here we are. Sarah has begun her senior year of college while living in France. I know. And behind the scenes, the Birdie Lab in the Manton Center for Orphan Disease Research at Boston Children's Hospital continue to research treatments to help manage neuropathic pain that children like Sarah experience while also researching for the causes of these conditions. So yes, the unexpected can create chaos and vulnerability, but also allow for the opportunity for connections to be created and strengthened. Sarah's Uncle Kevin, connecting us with a place to stay and connecting us with Jess, providing a safe haven that will last decades. Sarah's second grade teacher, Natalie Colby, working to keep Sarah connected with her peers and community. The Erythromelalgia Association providing guidance and support to us and so many others struggling with erythromelalgia. Maureen, who connected us with PALS Skyhope, providing free air transport from Lake Placid to Boston whenever needed. The Adirondack Foundation, who reached out and provided a grant from the Christopher Hollowell Fund, a fund created to support families with ill children. Why? Because it was at one time this family's heartbreaking journey. And finally, the connection of Dr. Birdie, the PPRC, and the researchers that continue to make connections throughout the world, working toward discovering cures and causes for erythromelalgia and other diseases associated with neuropathic pain in children. And it is these connections that remind us that no matter how deep in the woods we literally or figuratively are, We are by nature social beings that when faced with seemingly impossible situations, these unsolicited connections provide new ways of looking at old problems. Connections in our relationships, in our communities, with the experts, and most importantly, the connections that occur within ourselves that allow us to live our best lives. I believe Sarah May is proof of that. So, as I stand here today with life a little calmer and the clouds clearing away, I can wholeheartedly say that it was those who reached out and connected with Sarah and us who made all the difference. We know all the reasons why people may not ask for help when they need it. But I also know we are biologically designed to recognize when someone needs help. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the term charity originally meant Christian love for one's fellow, which I liken to love for one's fellow. We are designed to recognize when someone is in need of help. It is in our wiring, and it is truly a natural connection we can all make. Thank you.
And just thank you for sharing that story and giving us all a moment to reflect on the connections in our own lives and maybe within our bodies. The next couple of speakers that we have up are going to help us to explore our connection with our bodies and how those can influence our experience with the world. So to get ready, we are bringing up Josie D., who is a clinical exercise physiologist. She's a public health educator and a Tai Chi instructor. She does it all. And here tonight, she's going to help us get the blood flowing, get our bodies moving. And Josie will give us a teaser into Tai Chi, which is a mind-body practice, often described as meditation in motion. So if everybody could please put your hands together to welcome Josie.
Thank you. Thank you, Leanne. Greetings, everyone. Thank you to TEDxTupper Lake and the Wild Center for this opportunity to share Tai Chi with you at this conference. Tai Chi originated as a martial art and has evolved into a movement for health and wellness. Please do an internet search for the health benefits of Tai Chi. With practice, it can be a deeply transformative experience. Given the conference theme of natural connections, you'll see that many of the Tai Chi movements are based on nature. It cultivates our connection to and awareness of how we move through the day, how we breathe, and our life energy, which is our chi. This will be a Tai Chi experience, not a lesson, so there's nothing to learn, nothing to remember, and it's as easy as follow along, do what you see, do what I'm doing. It's very gentle, very slow movements. Think of it as mirror image. So for example, if I do something on this side, I'll ask you to do that as well. And if I do something on this side, you will do that as well. So the most important thing is you do what feels right for you, modifying the movements so that it's comfortable. Don't worry about getting it right. It doesn't matter what it looks like. What matters the most is what it feels like for you, your own experience. So what I'm going to ask you to do is stand up, put up your chairs, put any personal belongings on the chair, and we're going to spread out into the aisle so there's room to move. It's entirely optional, so just have a seat where you end up, but this way people will have room to move. And then we'll just move, breathe, and flow, and this will just be a few moments, a few minutes of Tai Chi flow. So I'm ready for the music now, thank you. So starting with our feet together, or whatever's comfortable for you, just take a moment to feel the bottoms of your feet in contact with the floor, truly connecting with the earth. And as we go through our movement, our feet are kissing the earth, and the earth is kissing us back. And take a moment to take a slow, deep breath. And just follow along. The hands flow up, drifting to center. The hands come down to our sides, floating up, sinking the chi, gathering the life energy all around us. And either foot steps out a little bit to the side, doesn't matter which foot. And now the hands float up in front, and then melting down like wax on a candle. Floating up, opening the door. One more. Gentle mist floating up over the pond, gentle raindrops. Then the hands open up and one hand glides down, the other hand glides over it. And then switch. This is called embracing the moon. Toss the moon and catch it. And one more. The hands float up overhead, backs of the fingers touch, and the hands come down. Waterfall cascading over the rocks. One foot steps out a little bit wider to the side. One hand floats across, leading with the back of the hand, and then the palm turns up. Other hand, back of the hand, floating up, plucking the stars. Footsteps in, stepping to one corner, the hands circle up, shifting our weight forward and shifting our weight back. Bathing breath. Stepping in, stepping to the other corner, bathing breath, bathing ourselves in chi, life energy. One more. Back to center, and one more, sinking the chi. Our hands come down to our sides, palms facing back, and as the palms turn forward, head turns to one side. Back to center, palms turn back, head turns the other way. No forcing, just gently letting go. Back to center, other side. Wise owl turns his head. The hands float up overhead, pressing down to our hips, up to our heart, and scoop a big ball of chi, life energy. And then up. Making a diamond shape with our thumbs and index fingers. This is called opening the heart. Shine your light, beam your love and kindness out into the world. Connecting with each other, connecting with all living beings. Hands come down to our side, feet together, and one more, sinking the chi. And on this last one, our palms come together, bringing our hands to our hearts. And I end with a gesture of respect and gratitude for sharing this time together and wishing you all a flowing day. Thank you.
And this, I think, was the perfect transition to our next speaker, Rose. Rose Pasquarello-Bucamp is a dancer, artist, improviser, educator, filmmaker, and activist. As of late, she is focused on reconnecting to invisible histories through site-specific work, such as Remnants, and engaging in climate change initiatives through embodied practice with the Adirondack Climate Project. both of which have been featured here at the Wild Center. Rose continues to perform and present her creative research internationally with a focus on the relationship between humans, the body, and the environment, and the role that the body plays in environmental justice, climate change, and beyond. So without further ado, let us welcome Rose.
Have you ever felt the magic of place? Perhaps you've lived someplace or visited a place that felt profoundly special. I grew up in Massachusetts, surrounded by the coastal plains, the ocean, and a canopy of deciduous trees. But I didn't have much chance to travel. So the first time I went to the Red Rock Desert of the Southwest, I was awestruck by the unique landscape. And I immediately felt a deep sense of connection in my body. I felt as if I understood the place on a cellular level. The same thing happened here in the high peaks of the Adirondacks. Dance brought me here. I'm a dancer and choreographer, and I really believe that a magical energy brought me to the Adirondacks. Now, I know how that sounds. It's a little out there, or perhaps a little mystical. But what is this magic of place? As I started to consider it, I turned to the dancer in me and looked at it through the lens of the body. So let me introduce you to the idea of ecosomatics. We can break it down. Somatics is the interconnection of your body and mind. It's the understanding that our mind is in our body and that our body moves through the world with a kind of kinesthetic intelligence, an inherent intelligence. The echo part of ecosomatics connects this mind-body awareness to the environment. It's the recognition that we are of the earth, composed of the same elements, and part of the interconnected systems on the planet. Think about it. We are born and raised for conditions on this planet. Our bones and muscles develop in response to gravity. If we were born and raised on the moon, where gravity is considerably different, our body composition and movement style would be vastly different. If our body and its kinesthetic intelligence are inherently linked to the earth, then centering our bodies in the fight against climate change is essential. There are obstacles. Many of us are less connected to the environment than our ancestors were. Think about your own life. How often are you able to immerse yourself in nature? How does your work or home life engage your body with the environment? Or does it? Have you seen the movie WALL-E with a robot and the adults are like reclined and kind of moving around space and they talk to each other through screens? So this may have been a glimpse into our near future where our reliance on technology strips us of our physical engagement in life, but this can't last. For us to make a change on this planet, our bodies need to be part of the story. After all, the Earth is a planetary body. So how do we begin to reconnect our bodies with the environment? There are many answers. I'm sure each of you could find one. But I'm going to share a little bit about how I'm using dance, movement, and the creative process to reconnect bodies and land. And I'm going to share some photos by Andrea Gluckman, one of my collaborators. For the past 5 years, I've focused on site-specific choreography as a means of reconnection, investigating its land by exploring its history and topography through a creative lens. I invite dancers and collaborators to join me on this journey of deep connection, where we listen to the land, literally, observe its nuances, write reflections, and respond physically. Together, we weave dance, music, storytelling, visual art to reveal the human and ecological memories of the land. Through performances, whether on stage, on site, or on film, we share our understanding of the environment with the audience. We share our understanding of the environment in our bodies with the audience in their bodies, creating a dialogue of bodies in space. Listening plays a crucial role, helping us to attune to the land and to each other, which deepens and enriches our collective experience. We welcome viewers to engage how they choose, but we encourage them to stay present in their bodies rather than distracted by screens, because their bodies are also activating these rich environments, thus widening the circles of impact, more bodies in the environment. So I'm going to share a dance film that I created through this process. And due to the watery nature, we decided that a dance film is the best modality. So as you watch this, I'm going to task you. This is an invitation for you to feel your own bodies. So sense your own bodies as you observe our bodies in the environment. Here we go. Oh, before I start, the music composition is by Paul Leary, choreography by myself, videography by Andrea Gluckman, and dancers are Zachary Frazee, Missy Full-Smith, Ann Harris-Wilcox, and Noelle Niche. So did you remember to notice your own sensations? Yeah. As I was watching, I felt the sand on my body. I've felt that on my body before I had that memory. So I know that not all of us are dancers or choreographers, but all of us have bodies. And so I thought we could take a moment and reflect on 5 actionable items that we can do to reconnect our bodies to the land. Number 1, prioritize your body. Remember that your body is part of the environment. Spend time in nature and reflect on how that feels. Reflect on your sensations. What does the smell of rain do for you? What does it feel like to walk along a beach versus walking in a field? Engage with the textures of the earth. Touch the tree and the soil and the water and the grass. And then reflect on the sensation. Understanding these sensations can deepen your connection. Number 2, invest in mindfulness activities. Engage in activities that intentionally connect you to the earth. Perhaps it's a sitting meditation outside, or a walking meditation, forest bathing, or other contemplative practices that connect you to nature. In fact, it's really easy. Let's do one right now. Seriously, so take your feet and put them on the floor. You're gonna stay sitting. Take your hands and put them on your lap, perhaps. And either close your eyes or have a soft focus, so you can kind of drop your chin to your chest. And let everything melt away and start to begin to become aware of your breath. So your inhale, the pause at the top, your exhale, the pause at the bottom. And on your next exhale, feel your feet planted on the earth and imagine roots going down into the earth. On your next inhale, imagine energy coming from the earth up your body into your lungs. And exhale, send it back down. As we inhale, we are receiving oxygen from other beings on this planet. As we exhale, we give back to them. We give them what they need. Another inhale, remembering that we're inhaling together, sharing a collective moment, collective space. Exhale, giving back. One more big, deep inhale. If you feel comfortable, you can exhale with some sound. And let your eyes float open. We could have done that for a lot longer. But it's easy, right? Just taking a minute a day to reconnect intentionally with the earth. Number 3, embrace kinesthetic empathy. So kinesthetic empathy is a form of embodied empathy. It's the ability to feel and understand states of other beings through our body. Sit with a tree or observe a rabbit in your yard at dusk. Consider what the world feels like from their perspective, but then go back into your body and try to understand and connect with these other beings in the natural world. Number 4, repattern your habits. Habits are repetitive behaviors that we all have, often rooted in our physical experiences. Since habits manifest in the body, it makes sense to focus on bodily change to alter these patterns. Our neuromuscular system connects our intentions from our brain to our physical actions in the world. Our current habits of convenience, like driving to work instead of walking, or going to the grocery store and picking processed foods instead of planting, growing, harvesting, processing them with our own bodies, these disconnect our bodies from the earth. Our bodies tend to choose the path of least resistance, the easiest way forward. And that's smart. It saves energy. But what if we consciously aimed to shift this? What if we made an effort to have a physical practice of engagement, deepening our connection to the earth, even if it's less efficient? For instance, perhaps we bike to work, or maybe we go to a farm and pick apples and support that harvest if we can't grow it ourselves. My educator, my dance educator, Peggy Hackney, always says, a change in the part is a change in the whole. That means just a little change in our bodies creates systems change on a bodily level, individually, but if we all have bodies, also at a community level. Number 5, act for change. Your body can be a site of resistance and change, and each of us can engage in this process in ways that reflect our unique talents and interests. Whether it's creating dances, collecting water samples, radical rest while camping, or participating in protests, use your body to engage in climate action. I encourage each of you to reflect on these ideas and go forward in your own life and consider how to apply them. Consider what it would mean to walk through life more consciously in your body. The body is a powerful tool for facilitating change, and we need to harness this power to help protect the planet. Thank you.
I heard you there, Rose. I think it's time. We got to prioritize our bodies. And the next thing we have in store for you is an amazing party. So we are going to, in a moment, don't move. We are going to stand up in just a moment. And we're going to head out into the Great Hall and into the museum. We have a suite of wonderful activities. So please, do not stop in the Great Hall. Keep going. We've got a whole bunch of exhibits, river otters, live animals out. We've got Tai Chi. We're going to have that interactive sound experience with Eric Stir. You're going to be able to listen to Tyler and his band play. And most importantly, eat amazing local food catered by Lakeview Catering. So we are so excited to be bringing you out to this fun event. Is there other things we need to tell them about?
Quick housekeeping. Everybody upon check-in should have received a yellow ticket. Good for one drink. If you did not,
That's
let us
okay.
know.
We'll get you one.
Other than that, we encourage you to check out some of the tables set up by our sponsors out in the Great Hall. So Adirondack Land Trust, Tai Chi with Josie D, Adirondack Frontier, and of course the Reynolds Group. So we encourage you to stop by and chat with those folks as well.
Don't forget, on your badges, there's some great conversation starters. Now, I don't have to worry, you all are great at this. I've already heard you buzzing and talking around today, but maybe try to find someone you don't know and see if they can talk to you, for instance, like me, about paddling. So I encourage you, at this moment, stand up with your vivacious effort and head out into the night. Be back here for our last speaker series. It's 7 o'clock.
7
Don't be late.
p.m.